nonfiction selection, Islands of Abandonment, Nature Rebounding in Post-Human Landscape by Cal Flynn. We also have the fiction book, The Shaman Sings by James D. Doss. The Zoom link is in the newsletter, so you can find it there. We are also still looking for greeters and safety volunteers. Westside has always had a group of cheerful, friendly people willing to welcome members, friends, and visitors to our service and keep us safe. Now that we've reopened, we need those friendly people once more to be greeters and safety volunteers. Please see Alice Thornton if you're interested in being a greeter, or Jerry Thornton for our safety volunteers. Also, subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Each Wednesday you get an email from us that is packed with information about Sundays, news, events, and volunteer opportunities. It's great and you'll love it. So be sure you visit our website, westsideuuc.org/subscribe. Finally, some more announcements. Stick around today and help out with taking down our holiday tree. That will be right after the service, so that we will make sure we can get that taken down. We have also been invited to walk with Tennessee Valley UUC in the MLK Parade. That's going to be Monday, January 17th. If you're interested in participating in that, please see Ellen Greenwood or contact her if you're not here in person today for more information.
Thanks, Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to you who are here and to those of you who are with us virtually. If I haven't met you yet, I'm Reverend Carol Bedeau. I'm privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she and her. I'm going to add a couple more announcements to this. One is that we have a new discussion group happening on Wednesday evenings, which is actually a fascinating group that started before the holidays, discussing what it's like to come out of Christian traditions into a UU context. So it's called Christian Roots Growing Branches, and it's about the many different kinds of experiences people have who have been raised Christian, whether that was a positive or a not so positive experience, and transitioning into Unitarian Universalism. You do not have to have been raised Christian to participate. There are people participating who are finding it a fascinating and educational conversation who didn't have that experience. So again, that information's on our website. And the last thing I want to tell you all about is some new COVID rules. So we all know that numbers are going up. Some of the other UU congregations in the area have closed down their in-person services. We've decided, the reopening committee here has decided to continue holding in-person services with a few changes. You'll notice a few changes. For example, you'll notice that Morgan and I are staying 6 feet apart. We're now going to use 2 separate lecterns so that the speakers are not using the same lectern. We also will not be having any more singing. We had a brief little window of singing, and it's gone for a while now. So there will be no singing, but there will be instrumental music at our services. And finally, we just want to encourage everyone, if you have the ability to do it, to get more advanced masks. We're seeing a lot of studies coming out about how N95 and KN95 masks are far more effective. So I know I haven't had a chance to go out and buy mine yet, but if you're able, we would encourage you to try to wear those masks to our service. We have a few available. We can't provide them for everybody, but we do have a few available. So in the coming weeks, you know, for those of us that are able to do it, it'd be good to try to get those more serious masks. We're discovering that cloth masks aren't quite as effective as we had thought. So that's a lot of logistics. Let's all take a deep breath with your mask. Take that deep breath. I mean, we have the luxury up here of whoever's actually speaking gets to have the mask off just so you can hear us. But as much as you are able, take a deep breath in. Find yourself as you release it in your seat, sitting in this room or a different room, in this moment, not in the past, not in the future, but present right here, right now, with whatever is with you right now. As I invite our bowl to sound, I invite you to simply allow yourself to settle deeper into whatever is true for you right this moment.
Our chalice lighting this morning comes from Oberlin UU Fellowship in Oberlin, Ohio, as printed in the UUA's online database of words of wisdom and chalice lightings. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together. And the lovely Sandra Thomas is going to play a little bit of opening music for us. Thank you for that, Sandra. Today, we are also going to light our community candle for Planned Parenthood's Knoxville location and for the members of the community who depend on their services for necessary health care. As some of you may know, on December 31st, the building was engulfed in flames and declared a complete loss. And a recent investigation has concluded that this was an act of arson. While telehealth services will continue for patients, this is yet another example of the hatred and struggles that many will face trying to access health care, ranging from reproductive health care, such as screenings and services for infertility, STDs, HIV, and pregnancy, to more general health care checkups, hormone therapy, and sex education. For many, Planned Parenthood provides necessary services that are otherwise inaccessible. Our reading for this candle comes from Molly Brewer, published on the UUA's database. This is a chalice lighting for when things are not okay. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you, that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But now our chalice is lit, and so all I ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. One of the many ways we can support one another and our community here at Westside is through an offering of monetary support. Please give as you are willing and able. For those of us joining virtually, our online donation page is linked through our YouTube channel on our website, and it should be as a QR code on your screen as well.
Thanks, Sandra. Thank you to all of you who continue to support Westside in what is surely a very strange time. By physically showing up, by showing up virtually, by continuing to support this institution with your resources, whether that's time or money or care or whatever it is. This is a time in our communities when things are not only strange, they're rather challenging. That song Sandra was playing, if you know the words, it's "I've got peace like a river." And right now, it seems like that sort of peace and joy and love that we're seeking, we have to kind of dig deep in a certain way to find it sometimes. So as Morgan mentioned, and I'm sure many of you are aware, we are sitting today with the fact that the Planned Parenthood clinic was burned to the ground by arson, and that is a heavy thing to sit with. We had already planned this service to be about reproductive justice before that happened. It's been weeks and weeks that we had planned for this today, but it's more appropriate. So I have a story I want to tell you about something that happened many years ago when I was living in California. I lived for 25 years in Northern California. And where I lived in California, I was just a few blocks from our local Planned Parenthood clinic there. So when I would drive to or from the grocery store, the post office, or whenever I took the off-ramp off the freeway from somewhere farther away, I drove past the clinic. It was literally just a few blocks from my house. So I passed it many times every week. And as is the case in so much of the United States, that clinic, the Planned Parenthood clinic, was the site of a lot of conflict. It had regular protests outside its doors, and those were just sort of a weekly spectacle in my family's life. Now, I personally was raised Catholic and have family members who are very devout Catholics. And I have incredible respect for that tradition, and I, of course, have incredible respect for clergy of any denomination. Okay? So it was a group of Catholic clergy who usually led the protests outside that clinic near my house. And one day I felt, you could say inspired, someone else might say crazy, but I felt inspired to stop, to talk to them. So I pulled over my minivan on the side of the road, and I got out and I walked up the sidewalk where they were protesting, and I really truly just wanted to understand what their thoughts were. They were yelling at anyone who tried to enter the clinic, and you could tell they were making assumptions about those people's motives, their needs, what they were there for. So I just stopped and I walked up to them and I said, what are you all hoping for? What are your goals here? What are you doing to support young families or families that are struggling or single parents? What kinds of services are you providing as alternatives to these people who are going here for services? You could say that I did not get a very positive answer to that question. Now, I have at other times had wonderful conversations with Catholic clergy on those topics who gave me very respectful, thoughtful answers, and we had deep conversations, but that was not what happened that day. Those kinds of questions, though, are the kinds of questions I continue to ask on these topics. I continue to ask those sorts of questions about reproductive rights and reproductive justice. My main concern remains the health and well-being of individuals and families and communities. And I'm not going to flat out take sides on any issue or demonize anyone, because I believe that part of my job is to help us build bridges in our communities, to ask questions and look for the opportunities when we can have conversations. Voices deserve to be heard, and I really believe that most people, most of the time, just want the best for children and families and communities. There's a wide range of perspectives on that, okay? These are very deeply personal and theological matters, but I will take a stance on how we talk to one another how we treat one another, how we behave, and how we act as we strive to make our world safer for children and the people who raise them. What happened last week at Planned Parenthood here in Knoxville is unacceptable. Violence as a means of expressing one's theological perspective makes absolutely no sense to me at all. It's like slapping a child to teach them not to hit. I've seen people do that. Slap a child for hitting someone, or screaming and yelling at a child to teach them to be gentler or more respectful. That just doesn't make sense. It's sort of ludicrous. So I think the vast majority of people that I know would say that what happened at the clinic at Planned Parenthood last week was unacceptable. I think the vast majority of people would say that they want families to be healthy, that they want parents and children to have resources needed to thrive, that they want adequate health care and education for all stages of life and all parts of raising families. And too often, when people think of reproductive justice, this topic for today, all they think about is the question of whether or not abortion should be legal. But reproductive rights and reproductive justice are much, much bigger than that. And what Planned Parenthood does, as Morgan was describing earlier, what it does in this community is so much bigger than that. So we need to start with some basic definitions here. First, reproductive rights and reproductive justice are different things. They're related, but they're not the same. So I'm going to give you a definition of reproductive rights. Reproductive rights is understood both as an individual's right to have reproductive health, which includes access to health care and medication and education, and also their right to make decisions about their reproduction and their reproductive health. So that's reproductive rights. Now, reproductive justice is a much broader concept even than that, and it extends to our understanding of how reproductive rights, those choices and services, exist in a socioeconomic and political context. This kind of understanding of how to think about reproductive rights has been around for a very long time. It's been particularly articulated by people of color, particularly women of color, indigenous women, and trans women for a long time. But the term was first really used publicly in 1994 by a group of African American women in Chicago who organized and named themselves Women of African Descent for Reproductive Justice. It was used formally by them for the first time to combine the idea of reproductive rights and social justice being inextricably intertwined, and particularly affecting underrepresented and oppressed groups of people. It ties basic reproductive rights to bigger social issues such as economic equity, racial justice, justice for LGBTQ people, and it calls us all to consider how things like sex education, prevention and treatment of STIs, prenatal care, pregnancy care, domestic violence assistance, and even fair wages are all a part of supporting healthy families in communities. Decisions about reproduction are ultimately decisions about raising families, and those decisions happen at the intersections of a whole lot of complicated things: social privilege, social prejudice, access, lack of access, economic stability, economic instability. These intersections are all essential when we ask these questions. So, like I asked those priests in California so many years ago, I ask us now, how do we make reproductive decisions personally for ourselves, in our local communities, and societally, nationally, as a whole community? How do we do that in ways that take all of those things into consideration? How do we avoid careless and insufficient simplifications? How do we avoid simplifying things to one procedure? Of course, the matter of access to abortion is a huge social question that is in our faces right now. Just a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court began hearing arguments in a case on the subject of whether or not the legality of abortion should be determined by states or the federal government. They started hearing those arguments the first week of December, and they will be going on through the coming months. The anniversary, Roe versus Wade will have its 39th anniversary on January 22nd. As we know, the Supreme Court may be making pivotal decisions this year on these matters. So we have a reason to be paying close attention to that specific issue, but it seems like we need to dig a little deeper. There's a deeper issue that needs to be addressed. How do we treat one another? How do we help one another? How do we support one another? How do we work out our differences? How do we all help one another in our common desire to provide good support for all children and all families? And how do we avoid oversimplifying and quickly judging? In my opinion, the basic role of the family, which is sort of the center point of reproductive rights and reproductive justice, it's the place where future generations are most powerfully shaped and influenced. Not the only place, but it's a very powerful place. The job of the family is to help each of us, as we are children growing into adulthood, help us understand how to be individuals living in society. Think about that for a minute. Think about your own childhood. What our families and our schools and our churches and our communities ultimately do as we are growing from childhood into adulthood is help us to understand how to be both an individual and a part of a larger society. Now, when this last week on Thursday, the Knoxville Fire Department publicly announced that they had ruled the Planned Parenthood fire in Arson, I thought about that a lot. That assessment means that an individual or individuals believed that it was acceptable to willfully destroy property and endanger the lives of people in the neighborhood, to endanger the lives of first responders, to make some sort of point. But we don't know what that point was. We certainly are going to make some guesses about that. We don't actually know what was going on in that individual or those individuals' minds. I can say with fair certainty that most people on all sides of reproductive rights and reproductive justice issues, many people, and I say this, friends, knowing lots of people who are not pro-choice, they are anti-violence. Many people. So we can't make this simple assumption that someone's view on this topic means that they supported this event. We can, though, say that we don't support that kind of action. What we need to do is step up in favor of more respectful ways of communicating, more respectful ways of interacting. The core value I really want to address here is the human right to security, to well-being, to health, and that requires our work in our communities. We all have a right to be safe, to be well, to have food and shelter and education and basic physical and emotional care and basic economic stability, which starts with our children. So for me, broadening the conversation from abortion rights to reproductive justice is really important. Planned Parenthood offers services to help families thrive, to help mothers get adequate prenatal care, to provide education and basic health services. For anyone on any side of these issues, this is simply essential health care and care. Specific medical decisions happen in a larger context. As I asked those priests that day, how are we addressing the larger context? How do we heal the harm done when violence is used as a tool in our social conversations? Let me ask you that again. What do we do to heal the harm that is done when violence is used as a tool in our social conversations. That happens too often in our society at large. It happens in our homes. It happens in our own minds when we're angry or hurt or frightened. The hardest thing we are asked to do as members of society is to choose to respond from love rather than to react from fear. That, it seems to me, is our greatest challenge right now. How can we support with love and care the things we value without having to lash out with violent words or deeds when we feel threatened? So, here's some things that we can do and that we are doing. The UUA's Social Justice Office, which is called Side with Love, is hosting a number of events this month to help us learn more about reproductive justice. You can find links and more information to all of that on the UUA's website. You can just simply Google it and you will find all sorts of things that are happening. That's a starting place on this issue. Strengthening our connections to our community is another good step. I'm gonna make another plug here that has been sort of a joke at Westside for many years. I'm gonna make another plug for nonviolent or compassionate communication as a technique. This technique urges us and teaches us how to speak respectfully when we disagree. It invites us not to start with blame and shame, but with being honest about the feelings we're actually having: fear, hurt, anger, and to speak respectfully. By simply acknowledging what's actually happening for us. I know a number of people right now who are closely connected to Planned Parenthood who are deeply grieving and also deeply afraid. Acknowledging that is important. Being heard matters and allows us to get the attention we need to heal ourselves and then our communities. Another step is that I'm going to be asking the board this month to consider making Planned Parenthood our next Share the Plate partner, to show our community's support for this agency and the work they do in our communities, supporting families in a wide variety of ways. We also continue here to support Family Promise, which provides services and support for families that are struggling with homelessness. We also always have available a basket in our foyer for people to contribute food that goes to local food pantries to support families. And I want to encourage us all to be thinking about those questions I asked those priests so many years ago in California. What can we do personally and as a community to support families? What can we do to affect the larger network of issues that make it hard for families to thrive? We, our community, this congregation, everyone listening to these words here or virtually, we are the context in which reproductive justice happens in East Tennessee. We are the bigger context. So let's make choices that are respectful and life-affirming and taking actions that give life rather than threaten life. I encourage us all to think about that over the coming weeks and months. Now, one of the ways that we support each other here at Westside is by having the chance to share what's going on for us. Share what we are experiencing in our own lives, in our own families. Today, we're going to be able to share our joys and concerns. We haven't done that in this room in a really long time, so we've left a lot of time for that to happen today. For those who are here virtually, you're going to have the opportunity to do that during coffee hour. So our live stream is actually going to be ending now as soon as we begin our joys and concerns, out of respect for the privacy of the individuals who choose to share something in this room today. But everyone who is part of this community, whether they're in this room or not, matters. So we're going to respect those who are here by ending our live stream. And for those of you who are attending virtually, we're going to invite you to come to our Zoom coffee hour, where we will have another opportunity for joys and concerns there that you can participate in. We know that everyone's lives are sacred. Each life is sacred. Each life deserves to be treated as sacred. Please know that all are essential to this community. And so I say goodbye for now to those who are attending virtually, and I invite those of you who might want to share a joy or a concern that is happening in your life to come forward and share that with us. Now, the way we're going to do this